It's 6 p.m. on a Monday here in Korea. Welcome to our newscast. I'm Daniel Che, here to provide you with the latest. Let us begin with the headlines. On this Memorial Day, President Park Geun-hye thanked those who fought and gave their lives for their country. She also vowed to continue efforts to ensure peace on the peninsula and promised greater benefits for war vets and quality jobs for retired soldiers. Yoon Byung-se held his first foreign ministerial meeting with his Cuban counterpart in Havana. For Seoul, one of the focal points was laying the groundwork for better relations with Havana while ensuring the island nation's longtime ally Pyongyang doesn't stand in the way. The new look National Assembly seems to be replicating its predecessor's old patterns as lawmakers continue to lock horns over assigning key positions at the parliament. Marking the 61st Memorial Day, a national ceremony was held this morning to remember the fallen heroes. President Park Geun-hye, who just came home from her trip to Africa and France, was there to give an address. Song Ji-sun starts us off with the president's message.
President Park paid tribute to the nation's fallen heroes during her speech on Memorial Day at the Seoul National Cemetery on Monday. She expressed the nation's gratitude to those who fought in the Korean War and those who fought for Korea's independence against Japan's colonization. She also expressed regret for the divided Korean peninsula, saying that North Korea's pursuit of nuclear weapons is the biggest obstacle standing in the way of a unified Korea, posing a threat to regional and global peace. Pointing to North Korea's recent claim of being a nuclear state made at its Workers' Party Congress last month, President Park warned once again that the regime's nuclear and missile development will only lead to further isolation and stronger pressure from the outside world.
정부는 북한이 비핵화의 길을 선택하고 대화의 장으로 나올 때까지 국제사회와 긴밀하게 협력하면서 강력한 제재와 압박을 지속해 나갈 것입니다.
The president pledged to firmly respond to any provocation from the north and vowed to further strengthen the country's defense readiness in alliance with the United States. With representatives from the country's rival political parties present at the ceremony, President Park also issued a call for unity.
국가 안보에는 여야, 지역, 세대의 구분이 있을 수 없습니다. 국민 모두가 하나된 마음으로 힘을 합쳐야만 분단의 역사를 마감하고 한반도의 평화와 통일의 길을 열어갈 수 있습니다.
In her first public appearance since returning from her trip to Africa and France, President Park also pledged to expand benefits for war veterans and secure quality jobs for retired soldiers. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
The first ever South Korea-Cuba foreign ministers meeting was held on Sunday local time. For Seoul, the purpose of the talks was to lay the groundwork for diplomatic relations between the two countries. But Cuba's long-standing ties to North Korea could stand in the way. Lee Min-young has this report.
South Korean Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se met with his Cuban counterpart Bruno Rodriguez in Havana on Monday as part of Seoul's efforts to lay a foundation for improving bilateral ties with the island nation. During the historic talks, Minister Yoon reportedly conveyed Seoul's desire to establish diplomatic ties with Cuba.
We are expecting to maintain close ties with Cuba by continuing talks on various levels, and South Korea is mapping out subsequent consultations with the state on many other issues as well.
Minister Yoon also raised the international concern over North Korea's nuclear ambition, which could add to the growing pressure on North Korea. Although the talks were held in a friendly atmosphere, there was no immediate response from Cuban Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez on normalizing diplomatic relations. Experts say that is because of the possible backlash from North Korea, which has maintained close relations with the Caribbean states since 1960. North Korea has recently made efforts to boost ties with Cuba amid the stronger international sanctions on Pyongyang, possibly in a bid to block Seoul's efforts to build relations with Havana. This is the first official bilateral meeting between the two, though they met each other at talks in New York in 2013. It is also the first time a South Korean foreign minister has ever visited the island nation, as Seoul and Havana haven't had any diplomatic relations since the Cuban Revolution in 1959. Lee Min-young, Arirang News.
Senior diplomats from the United States and China will sit down for talks in Beijing amid rising tensions over North Korea and the South China Sea, two topics that are expected to dominate the two-day Washington-Beijing strategic and economic dialogue. Kim Hae-sung sheds light on what's at stake.
The 8th U.S.-China Strategic and Economic Dialogue got underway with an opening address by Chinese President Xi Jinping, who emphasized the importance of cooperation between the two global superpowers.
China and the U.S. need to increase our mutual trust and deepen our coordination on major global and regional issues like climate change, development, the internet, non-proliferation, military, and law enforcement.
The dialogue between the two countries' senior diplomats will focus on three main subjects: North Korea, trade, and South China Sea. A meeting between Chinese President Xi Jinping and top North Korean diplomat Lee Soo-yong on June 1st took Washington by surprise, and the U.S. is expected to continue pressing China to impose stronger sanctions on the North. Trade is another thorny issue. Just after China's bilateral talks with North Korea last week, the U.S. Commerce Department issued a subpoena to Chinese tech company Huawei Technologies to investigate whether it broke U.S. export controls by trading with North Korea and 4 other countries. This was seen as a warning to China, and experts believe Washington will use similar moves to push for further changes in China's currency controls and curbs on industrial output.
And implementing policies to substantially reduce production in a range of sectors suffering from overcapacity, including steel and aluminum, is critical to the function and stability of international markets.
The tensions surrounding China's buildup of military bases on reclaimed islets in the South China Sea are also likely to dominate the talks. This has become an ever more contentious issue between the two countries, with the U.S. sending warships and aircraft carriers to the region. The security dialogue between U.S. and China has been held every year since 2009 and wraps up on Tuesday. Kim Hae-sung, Arirang News.
South Korea will send one of its top officials to China on Wednesday to counter the latest visit by a high-ranking North Korean official to Beijing last week. But on a broader scale, Seoul is aiming to put pressure on countries friendly to Pyongyang. Here's Kim Mo-kyun with the full story.
South Korea has rolled out a one-on-one counter-diplomacy plan on the countries North Korea has been trying to cozy up to. Shortly after North Korea's ceremonial head of state Kim Yong-nam visited Equatorial Guinea for talks with President Teodoro Obiang, President Park Geun-hye traveled to Ethiopia, Uganda, and Kenya and held discussions with her counterparts. 10 days after North Korea's vice chairman of the Workers' Party of Korea's Central Committee Kim Yong-chol visited Cuba to deliver a letter written by Kim Jong-un, South Korea sent its Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se to Havana as well, citing diplomatic reasons. This time, it's China. Last week, a North Korean delegation led by Lee Soo-yong, vice chairman of the North Korean Workers' Party's Central Committee, went on a 3-day visit to China, during which he delivered another letter written by the North's young leader. Shortly after, Seoul's foreign ministry announced that Kim Hong-kyun, its special representative for Korean Peninsula Peace and Security Affairs, will travel to Beijing on Wednesday for talks with his Chinese counterpart, Wu Dai-wei. Seoul's multi-pronged approach is apparently aimed at mounting pressure on North Korea for its recent nuclear and missile provocations.
This will add an extra layer of burden to the North Korean regime. It could make North Korea feel uncomfortable approaching things with countries that are still friendly with them.
The South Korean envoy is expected to seek feedback on the Chinese government's talks with Lee and exchange views on the North Korean nuclear issue. Prior to his 2-day trip to Beijing, Kim will meet with Alain de Rooij, the Secretary General of the EU's European External Action Service in Brussels on Monday and Tuesday. Kim Mo-kyun, Arirang News.
Turning to domestic politics, Korea's 3 main parties are trying to work out who should take key positions in the 20th National Assembly. The clock's ticking as the first extraordinary session is scheduled for Tuesday. Shin Se-min explains why a compromise is looking ever more unlikely.
Time is running out. The first extraordinary session of the 20th National Assembly is set to take place on Tuesday. But Korea's 3 major political parties have yet to decide which party should take the coveted position of National Assembly Speaker as well as the 2 deputy positions. To try to work out a compromise before they are forced to vote, the deputy floor leaders of the three parties, Kim Do-eub of the ruling Saenuri Party, Park Won-ju of the main opposition Minju Party of Korea, and Kim Kwan-young of the minor opposition People's Party, are in the process of fine-tuning the differences on Monday. It's their first meeting since Tuesday, the last time they tried to narrow their differences on the issue. They're also stuck on who should chair key parliamentary committees, which is another part of the negotiations. The Minju Party has the largest number of seats following its sweeping victory in the general election in April, which means it would be expected to take the speaker post. But the Saenuri Party has not yielded in negotiations and says the seat should go to the ruling party, regardless of which party has a majority. Currently, Minju Party has 123 seats, the Saenuri Party has 122, and the People's Party has 38. If the parties fail to compromise and it comes down to a vote, the speaker position will likely go to an opposition lawmaker given the party's parliamentary majority. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Korea's exports have been on a downward spiral for the longest period ever. Not surprisingly, the country's ranking among OECD members in terms of export growth rate took a bit of a dip. Unfortunately, making matters worse, according to our Kim Min-ji, things are not looking up.
South Korea's ranking in terms of export growth rate has plummeted over the last 12 months. According to the OECD, Korea sat in fourth place among 31 member countries in January last year, despite exports falling 0.9% from a year ago. Export conditions continue to worsen, pulling down Korea's ranking with it. And in January this year, when exports posted their biggest fall in nearly 6 years, the country sat at 28th place, down a staggering 24 notches. Although Korea's exports continued their downward spiral in May, the pace of decline slowed to its lowest level so far this year. The government says there are signs that exports are on a recovery track. For instance, the volume of exports rose for the second straight month in May, and the average daily export value also hit a high for this year. But experts aren't so optimistic, as external conditions are far from ideal. Oil prices may not pick up anytime soon, as last week's OPEC meeting on lowering production failed to reach any substantial agreement. On top of that, the U.S. Federal Reserve could hike rates as early as this month, and Britain might vote to leave the European Union. A combination of those could throw the global economy off track for a while.
Although some sectors may see a pickup in exports, overall it doesn't seem as though conditions will get better soon. Despite government efforts, the problems lie with external economic conditions, and that's not something the government can fix.
Experts stress the need for efforts from individual companies as well. They suggest local firms try and diversify their export items and foster new growth engines by ramping up investment in R&D. A failure to do so could mean more gloom in the months ahead. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Let's shift gears to some positive numbers now. Sister companies Hyundai Motor and Kia Motors have reached a domestic auto sales milestone. According to industry sources, the two Korean auto giants have sold more than 30 million vehicles since they came onto the market in 1962. The sales for Hyundai are estimated at 18.5 million and it's 11.5 million for Kia. The two bestsellers are made by Hyundai. Its midsize Sonata is the most popular model with sales of more than 3.3 million units since 1985. The second biggest seller was the Avante, sold as the Elantra in the U.S., with nearly 2.8 million units sold since 1990. The two companies collectively accounted for 8.7% of the global auto market in 2015, selling more than 7.8 million cars that year alone. In other parts of our world, voters in Switzerland have overwhelmingly rejected a basic income plan initiative that suggested a universal and guaranteed monthly benefit of slightly over $2,500 after tax. 77% of voters in Sunday's referendum opposed a measure that would have applied to every Swiss citizen 18 or older, regardless of their employment status or wealth. The supporters of the initiative insist fewer employment opportunities were available, with more jobs becoming increasingly automated. The Swiss government said the plan would damage the economy as it required major spending cuts and tax increases. The parliament also argued that handing out free money would result in fewer people choosing to work. Switzerland is the first country to hold a national referendum on an unconditional income measure. We've come to the end of our newscast. More updates coming your way at 10 p.m. Korea time, so do join us then. Thanks for watching.